Hey, welcome to the Open House Show. I'm Jesse Meadow. Today we have a great show for you. Welcome. I hope you're going to enjoy this a lot. We have Jack Sweeney, Director of Enrollment at the New School, with us today. My partner in crime, Chris Mitchell, is also going to join us. We're going to be diving into balancing budgets, the tactics and some methods that we can use with tuition, financial aid, the new market of today. So we have a lot to discuss. Let's jump right into it. Chris, hello there. Jack, hey, how we doing?
Hey, everyone.
Welcome.
Jack.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Chris always setting the mood lighting for us. I love it.
That's right. Always be on brand, Jesse.
So, Jack, we'll jump right into it. But before we get started with the content pieces, obviously we like to introduce yourself to everyone, talk about a little bit about how you got to where you are and, how many years you've been in the business and what excites you about it.
Sure. So Jack Sweeney, I'm a director of enrollment at the New School in Northwest Arkansas, so right up by Fayetteville area. I've known these two guys for quite a number of years. And when they asked me to come on and talk to them, I, of course, didn't want to, but decided that I would do that anyway just to help them. I've been working in admissions for probably close to 19 years now, and worked my way through many schools throughout the country. Had the opportunity to work at different schools, whether they're day boarding, all boys school. And so the experiences that I've had hopefully will help answer some questions today and be helpful to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that your years of experience and definitely the types of schools that you've worked at will add a lot of insight. So, tell us a little bit about the New School. What draws people to the New School, Northwest Arkansas? I haven't been there myself. Maybe explain a little bit about those draws.
Yes. So the New School is going to be 50 years old next year. It started off as an early childhood school. That's the foundation of the school, and as the families that are from here, like the Tyson families and the J.B. Hunt families, as their kids went through, they decided to add grades as they went along. So pre-K 4 went from K to 4, and then 4, 5, and 6, 7th and 8th, and then 5 years ago we had our first graduating class. So the high school's relatively brand new, so we celebrated that last year. So we are the only true school in the Northwest Arkansas. There's only two true independent schools, but we are the only school in Northwest Arkansas that you can start at 12 months and go all the way to 12th grade. So that kind of sets us apart. The area here in Northwest Arkansas, you've probably heard of Walmart before.
Yeah.
Walmart owns this area, but then we have Tyson and J.B. Hunt, and what those companies bring in is a lot of people from outside of Northwest Arkansas, so moving in from California, New York, that know what independent schools are. So it's not a tough market, but it's not an easy market, because those families that are moving into the area typically know what an independent school is and what it can offer their family. And in an education, in a community sense, it's really trying to get the people from Northwest Arkansas that have lived here their whole life to see the other options besides a religious-based school or the public schools. And the public schools are not bad here. There's a lot of great schools here.
Yeah, we actually talked with Cameron Steese with the Village School in Naples. They just graduated their first class, I think it was last year, maybe the year before. So yeah. A lot of these schools just starting to get their full from lower school all the way through. Yeah. But that public school option, that's tough. I mean, when you have good public schools, it's on the admissions departments, the schools messaging to show the values. And the differences that they're not going to be able to get at a public school just because of the setup there. But leading into that, talking about independent schools, obviously the content piece that we have today is more about the budgets, more about tuition, financial aid, some tactics, enrollments, and along with that is obviously the market itself. So I guess, from someone that's locked in, that's made connections all across the country in a variety of different schools. What are you seeing as far as the trends in independent schools? How are you seeing them, formulate their budgets? I would say, in the past few years, but definitely looking to the future.
Yeah. So when you take a look at what the market, not just nationally, but regionally as well, The trends are, I hate to use the word the perfect storm, but that's exactly what we got ourselves into with COVID, and then the economic trends going up, and every 8 years in independent schools, we're on the downturn of that right now. So it's been interesting. I will say that we've seen enrollment here go down from where it was before, but also go up. And I know that doesn't sound right, but we had healthy attrition, but we also were able to attract families due to COVID that were not willing to go to a class size of 25 or 30 kids in a class and wanted a safer option. And so a lot of schools throughout the country have seen that. Nationally, they've seen their enrollment, specifically in day schools, go up, trying to find a safer option for their kids. Less kids, less people on campus means, well, it doesn't always mean this, but a lot of people thinking, and we did too with our risk mitigation, that we would get some of those families. So there were decisions made in this region or this area of some of the public schools that they were going to go virtual. And as soon as that happened, basically our enrollment went through the roof, with a lot of the help from you guys getting that piece out there that we were going to open on time. And so there's different trends in different areas. You know, if you look at boarding schools, you look at single-sex schools, and then the day school market. You know, everyone's kind of seen their applications go down in certain areas, but also there's been an uptick on a lot of national recognition to private schools or independent schools that we're open, that we're staying safe, we're doing the things that we need to do. So a lot of it, you know, a lot of these trends could go either way, and it's hard to really, I mean, this is probably the hardest time in my 18, 19 years of doing it, and I was a part of it in 2008 when the economy just fell. And so I was in Dayton, Ohio, and believe me, it hit there before it hit anywhere else in the country. But we're all waiting to see what happens. Are we going to get a vaccine? If we get a vaccine, do our applications go up? If we continue on this COVID, you know, trajectory of all these cases and everything, does that mean that people are going to feel less safe? I can tell you that all the people that I've dealt with and talked to, not just families but other colleagues, that the virtual option is not something that these parents are loving right now. A school cannot do a virtual option in an in-school option at the same time. It's almost impossible to do, specifically when you have so many things going on.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting times. I mean, the virtual component for a family, you know, obviously is not just the education. You know, they're talking, how are they able to go to work? Who's watching the kids during the day? There's so many other things that are involved with that virtual component that you know, makes it tough to move forward. So it's the great unknown. There was a huge boost because of in many schools. We've heard the same story, that COVID boost, but keeping them, you know, how, you know, retention is going to be huge. What is next year going to look like? You know, if the fall in public schools are going to be, you know, more virtual again, then I would imagine it'd be a little bit more of the same this, you know, as we saw this year. But if not, you know, what kind of value has the schools instilled in the community to make those public school families want to stay? You know, not everyone's going to be able to be saved no matter what, but, you know, there is opportunity there to try to keep that enrollment. And obviously, when retention, you know, when you're retaining a lot of your students, you don't have to get a lot of the new students. You know, it's a lot easier on the enrollment cycle and on your budgets. But, you know, kind of leading towards that, the generation of today, and definitely the generation moving forward, you know, the market, the parents that we're talking about, they're values based, they're principles based. I mean, education's important for them, but they're also going to want to align themselves with a school that fits their values. And, you know, while independent schools and private schools definitely fit that mold for them, it's you know, the ability of them, of those families to afford that kind of education is really going to be you know, the kind of the upcoming challenge. What are you seeing or hearing? You know, I know NACE has been talking about it for years. I know their latest trend book talked about you know, the financial stress that this new generation of and the new market's going to have, you know, with millennial generation and such. What are you seeing as far as that new market that's coming on, and then, you know, how schools are preparing for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the millennial market has changed the the landscape of independent schools, and really because they're saving less money, their college loans and all of that. So schools have had to be really creative on what they're going to do moving forward. And so, NIAS has said for years, Pat Bass has said this, he was a former president, that independent schools are pricing themselves out of the market. And so you're looking at different ideas, different ways to go, whether it's an index tuition, whether it's a reset of tuition, or it's a freeze. And a lot of schools right now are thinking that, if we raise tuition even at a 1%, you're still asking for more buy-in, obviously asking for more tuition dollars. And so being creative and trying to look at different options that you can give your family so that their value proposition is still there, or the value proposition is still there, and they're saying, okay, well, now we have a little bit more discretionary income to help pay for the values in the community and the academics and the athletics and arts that your school offers. So we've looked at a lot of different things here. There's a school up north from us, about 20 minutes away, that did index tuition. And so to do index tuition right now would not put us anywhere in their market. In other words, they own that index tuition. It's new, it's flashy. So we've had to look at other things. Do we reset? Do we keep it the same? Ultimately, the goal is to try to obviously increase enrollment, but increase it in a way that we're able to retain them year after year. And one of the things that we've seen go on with COVID here is we've had a lot of public school families come, which has been great. But are we going to be able to retain them and keep them? And so that's where the program and the community and the things that you do, and saying, well, you weren't here before, why? But now that COVID's here, you came. So how do we move them to continue to move along and stay here? If they couldn't afford us before or didn't want to pay for it, they did it because of COVID. Now we've got to keep them in there, keep them and retain them. And so we're in the middle of board meetings, and we're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do. I'm a firm believer that lowering tuition or looking at it not just because of COVID, but because of where we are, and that looks at like a reset model or using NTR to see if we can increase the amount of kids that we have here, which ultimately increases your revenue. And this, Jesse, 95, anywhere between 90 and 100% of revenue comes from enrollment. And so it's so important in a school's survival as well as their financial sustainability for the future.
Yeah, Jack, could you explain a little bit more the index model for some that might not be familiar with it, or what the approach is to that?
Yeah, so the index model is basically you take a range of tuition, and for example, this one of the schools that uses it that I know of, they take your income and they put you in a bracket of what you're going to be able to afford, and so they're very open. So if you make $150,000, you fit into this bracket of, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but whatever that number is, you pay $7,500. Where if you fall in the bracket of 300, you pay the full price. And so if you continue to move that forward, it helps in the short term. It doesn't necessarily help in the long term, because most of your families are going to fall into that lower income bracket.
So it's basically taking some of the FA tactics that have been used in the past by some schools and kind of formalizing that index.
Correct.
And so what are some of the FA tactics that maybe not only you're using, but a lot of schools are using to kind of help with budgets and some of the strategies, especially going into an unknown like we are currently?
Yeah, so I've been a big proponent of net tuition revenue over my years. I started it back in 2008, and that's basically trying to get as many kids as you can in, paying a certain amount of price in order to get to that revenue goal. So many of our schools these days, and specifically day schools, and maybe some boarding with beds, but we'll talk about day schools, they're looking at how many desks they have in that classroom, and they need to have a kid in every single desk. And that's a great way to look at it, because obviously if you have a class of 16, you want 16 kids in here. But really what you need to do is put a dollar sign on them and figure out, okay, how much can we get if we fill that class of 16? Because if we didn't have that class full of 16, then we're leaving revenue on the table. And that goes into financial aid. And using financial aid, most schools will use it to grow their diversity or their accessibility. And using that tuition revenue, you're using it in a different way. You're using it to reach that bottom line goal, so you're solid and you're whole. And it's an interesting topic. Some love it, some don't. But it is your FA, and I was on a task force with the SSS financial aid, and I'd have people like looking at me like I had 3 heads. But if your financial aid, you can do what you want with it. Whatever your goal is for it, if it's to build the diversity or accessibility, or to actually be solid at the end of the year.
Playing devil's advocate a little bit, what are some of the downsides to that model, Jack?
If it's not done right, you can send your school into a spiral financially. So you really have to work with your business manager, your board of directors or board of trustees, and your head of school. And it's the one thing I love about my job is the data. Every day is a different day, and you always collecting different data and tracking it. And so you'll hear this a lot in admissions. We look at obviously the current year we're in, we look at the following year, and then we look at a 5 and a 10-year model. And so we can figure out exactly where we are or where we're going to be if things stay the same. And obviously that's not the case in most schools. Things change. Obviously with COVID, you can see that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good tactic to use, when you're trying to build certain programs, but it also, it makes the whole enrollment process, creative. You're gonna need to, depending on what your need is as a school, like you said, are we trying to build our diversity? Are we trying to fill seats? Are we just trying to meet budgetary goals? Is this a good family that's been with us a long time and they've come on some hard times? We want them to finish here and become an alumni. Mm-hmm. There's a variety of reasons, but to be able to mix and match and play with those numbers while still meeting your overall goal, that's part of the creative process of enrollment management. And, kind of without that piece, you're really just boxed into the applicants you have, who you accept, and that's really it. So it can definitely make things interesting. I wonder, with, obviously we've talked before, not even just in this industry, but in everything, COVID has been, it's exacerbated everything. It hasn't really created much. All of these things and issues and challenges and problems were underlying already. We saw enrollment. We talked about it a little bit before. The new market that's coming in now, that will be the market for the future, doesn't have the financial stability that they once did. The cost of living is higher. You were talking about outpricing, the tuition model compared to what this new market can have. So now that we've gotten into this place, has this really, where we were maybe talking about it a little bit before, has this really sped up schools and boards and, whoever is dealing with that, business offices, that conversation about tuition pricing? Are we needing to reset? Are we needing to freeze? If you don't want to go full on to resetting, have you seen some of that or heard some of that in your conversations with colleagues?
Yeah, we have, and I think it's trying to look into the 8 ball, the magic ball, and figure out, okay, what's going to help us the best and get us out of this. And there's a lot of schools that a lot of colleagues or people that I've talked to that are going to be fine because they have huge endowments and they can weather this storm and all of that. But the schools like us, who our endowment is not significant, we have to be that. We have to do those creative things. We have to be. We don't have to necessarily revolutionize admissions or enrollment management, but it's not just about those kids that come through the door, the families that come through the door that are applying. It's all the things put together, and that's what you have to. What I think COVID and the last couple of years we've had to focus on is retention. Obviously, number one, admissions applications, getting that up, but then also thinking about what does this mean for next year? What does this mean for the following year? There's a lot of things in schools, specifically when you set a budget or you set a tuition price, that you can bring it along throughout the years and figure out, okay, if we did a 2% increase this year, what do we have to do next year? And we were, I was at a school that we did an 8% my first year, and we saw our enrollment just absolutely drop significantly. Was that the right time to do an 8%? Maybe. The market told us the market said it was going to be a good idea. But what would happen is like 3 or 4 years later, now you're playing with that bogey in the room of what you did 3 or 4 years ago. And so there's our profession in admissions enrollment. We're getting better and better every day. Every year you see these qualified people. There's a lot of people out there that it's all about the data. And they're good at those relationships and everything like that. But they think data tells them everything, and that's not always the case. Sometimes you got to concentrate on the data, but then you got to concentrate on retention and see what your families are doing and what they're thinking, and that has a lot to do with your attrition and stuff like that.
I mean, it's definitely a juggling act for sure. I mentioned this on other shows before. I think a lot of the next decade or so is going to be a lot of reflection in this industry. Based on my experience of talking with clients across the country, tradition is very hard to change from in this industry. And so a lot of people get stuck on what they're used to doing. So I'd love to hear your insight really around kind of this. I know we briefly touched on it, but this generation of parents that really kind of what separates them from maybe the parents 10, 20 years ago that schools are going to have to really adjust to, or they're not going to survive outside of having big endowments. And so where do you see the pitfalls, Jack, of really how do we communicate with this generation of new parents? What are some of the concerns that if we don't address, we might, box ourselves out of the market or not get the type of traction we've seen years past?
Yeah, I think the one important thing that the generations that we have looking at schools right now is communication, and having it be effective communication. Before 10 years ago, it was email was fine, or getting something in the mail like a postcard was fine, or maybe even picking up the newspaper and going through it and seeing an ad or something like that for the paper. What we've done here is that we spent more time and more money on looking at digital marketing than anything else, because you want to reach someone's phone or their iPad. You don't necessarily have to go spend a lot of money in a magazine just to have an ad there. And so we've really tried to figure out what's the communication that our market is interested in and seeing and hearing. And it has a lot to do with storytelling. It has a lot to do with relationships and about a community. The academics are always going to be there. I mean, obviously, a college acceptance list is huge, but also, what are you doing with the younger kids and the families and having them be supported and feel supported? And so a long time ago, when I first started in this, they said, it's pretty cliche, but they say everyone is a part of the admissions process or admissions office. And that means your custodial folks, your front staff, your teachers, your parents, your alums, your board. And so relying on those people is so important. Our biggest marketing tool right now, or what we see the most success with, is word of mouth. And so important that we continue to move that along and nurture that and maintain it moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, word of mouth is so huge, and that's going to be with retention. That's going to be with new students, especially at day schools where the community's small. In boarding, obviously, my experiences when I was in boarding admissions, families would have friends that were in the same camps back home, and they would find out and they would get interested. They'd come for tours. They'd come, but then you have that other component. Where it's outbound, where you're going out and reaching them, whether through agents or school fairs, personally yourself. But it is interesting, the fact that, and not just with big ticket items like enrollment, but even with smaller ticket items, the sales process for this new generation has been taken away from the people that used to run it. I mean, they come to your door, 80% already researched. They've been to your website. They've looked up things. It's not like, hey, I just heard about you. Let's go check the place out. You're one of the finalists if they're contacting you at that point. And to take that part of the process out it has been a unique transition for many industries, trying to deal with this new parent generation. But word of mouth is so key. And when you talk about everyone on campus needing to be involved, that student experience is crucial. When we talk to schools that have kids that they have all the options in the world and they still want to stay there, they've done good things with their school culture. They've done good things with the school environment. And that's so key and crucial, because when they come on for a tour, we always used to say, like, it's great to see us on, even if you had a 360 video, it's great to see us. But when you come on campus, you're going to feel us. Yep. You're going to feel the environment. You're going to meet the people. You're going to have that experience, and you're going to see what it's like to be a part of this community. And, that is going to be the one thing that drives this generation of parents, especially with the kids too.
Yeah. Well, 10 years ago, I wouldn't say that your website was the most important thing. It was probably your view book. And I may even be outdating myself. It might be 5 years ago, but your website is so important. And the data you get from it, the Google Analytics that you get from your website of what's an exit page, where are people exiting on your page. And ours was tuition a year ago. And without even asking, I just went ahead and took tuition off. And so you're going to get all the information we want you to get about academics, arts, athletics, community. And the question you're going to, when you go to exit that website, you're going to say, well, how much does it cost? Well, I got to call them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, call me. I'm going to tell you how much it is, but I'm also going to have the opportunity to tell you that we have financial aid or we have scholarships. And so that strategic move right there, although it looks like we're not being transparent, I would rather you hang up the phone with me and say, it's too high, I can't afford it, but at least I've told you everything. Then you leave a website and I never had the opportunity to talk to you. And so that's where the biggest change I believe has happened, in the sense of your website can tell a lot. Sometimes it doesn't tell the right thing, but you, as an enrollment manager, you're not just worried about applications, inquiries, and enrollment contracts. You got to look at the data and you got to say, okay, this is where people are leaving. Why? Why are people not filling out an inquiry form or doing the next step? And so that's where you have to get them into. And if you remember in the summertime, when we worked together with Schoolcraft and the new school, was basically looking at, okay, you know what, get them to inquire, and after that, it's on me. Mm-hmm. I have to get them to go to the next step and to come here. And I think I wouldn't say I bat 1,000, but I have a pretty good batting average if I can get them through the front door.
Yep, Chris has got him muted. There we go.
So I think also one of the things too, and I've had many conversations with schools about this, is think for a second how much money schools spend on the upkeep of their campus, right? And how beautiful that is. And when prospective families come on to campus and giving that tour and kind of talking about the school and the culture and the ambiance of it. And then you look at the website and it looks like it was put together, in the early 2000s. And so, like, for this new prospective family and generation, where the first time they're going to engage in your school is on your website or social media, it should really reflect the type of approach you have when people step onto your campus as well. And I think schools, Jack, to your point, are finally making that connection, as websites are an admissions tool. They're not anything else but an admissions tool to be able to help, prospective families, get a better understanding of your school, who you are, your culture, to what extent they can through a website. Not an information portal for prospective or for current parents, et cetera, where it can be that. But I think a lot of schools, need to make sure to keep their eyes on what's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's very simple to do stuff like that. You can make the basis of the website, admissions oriented, and still keep that information for the parents on a separate place on the homepage. A lot of schools do that, where parents log in, they have their own login information, and then it sends them to all the information that they might need. But at the end of the day, if you're just coming onto the site at all, for the first time, it's obviously a welcome admissions about the school, how to contact. But going back to your point a little bit, where they were jumping off at the tuition page, and it's good to be transparent, but at the same time, are you losing people because you're not explaining the whole story, in one piece? They might have sticker shock at the price tag and not realize that there are other options for them to enroll at that school. Like you were saying, that when you get them on the phone, you're able to relay those options to them. And it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about, different tactics that you can use and different ways that you can use financial aid to help bolster that enrollment. If you've got someone that's getting If you've got empty seats, you give out 20%, but I'm getting 80%, that's not so much bad business. And in the long term, you're getting appreciative families that will be, whether personally they feel like they've gotten something and they owe the school, as far as being a contributing member. And they'll remember that if you give them the good experience. Myself and Chris, we go back to Montverde all the time as an alumni. It was a special place. It was a good experience for us. You give that to someone. They may not be in the best financial place then, but as they grow older, who knows where their jobs will take them, and who knows what alumni giving you'll be getting. When you're starting to play the long term, short-term goals can always help long-term ends.
Yeah. Plus, I also think, getting back to kind of the digital side of this and really some of the challenges that are presented to this industry, with having digital, like your website or social media being your first stop, in your point, Jack, knowing that you were losing a lot of people on your tuition page, you could create a separate funnel for those families where, over the next few days or weeks, they get hit with a lot of things about FA and how the new school is affordable and things of that nature, to where in the past, they got your brochure, they came talk to you, whatever it may have been, or got your flyer, and you never knew why they did not follow through, how you work them through that enrollment funnel. And, obviously digital gives you a lot more tools to work with, which I think is another aspect that I think a lot of schools are just starting to come around to it. And even the ones that believe they're doing digital advertising isn't doing it at the level that they could be or capable of.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So, Jack, with the talk a little bit about that tuition resetting, it's interesting because I'm not so sure that's not going to be pressed upon schools that aren't really considering it now. Maybe not in the next year or two, but definitely when you're talking the next 5 years, 10 years, in order to stay afloat. Have you seen schools implement this already? Like, is there some data that's out there that is showing, that this can work, that this, is probably going to need to happen just to stay within the range of the market today?
Yeah, well, the schools that I've talked to have had a lot of success with that. And it's not a wide reach of schools that have actually tried it. Most schools are looking at freezing and doing stuff like that. But the schools that have done it have seen their applications go up, have seen their retention rates are a lot higher. And it's really coming up with that actual plan of how you're going to look at it through the next couple of years. And so it's so important when you're going to do anything like this, with whether it's tuition reset or index tuition or any kind of like NTR, net tuition revenue, you have to look at the data. NAIS has a great market view that you can look at, and basically it tells you what your region is. You put in the zip codes, and you can see what the financial gap is between families in certain zip codes, and how if your tuition is 17 or 18 or 19,000, where they are. It also gives a lot of good information, so you can kind of plan. When are you going to tip the market point? And so we've thought in the past, couple of years here that if we get above $20,000, it's going to be too high, too much. And you could talk about a boarding school that the number used to be above 50, and now it's if it gets above 70, that's way out of line and kind of way out of whack with what people can actually afford. And so day schools, depending on where you are, for us being at an average between 15 and 19,000, you have a family moving in from New York or California, they're like, wow, I'm getting such a deal. This is unbelievable. Because their tuition is $35,000, $40,000.
Right, of course.
And so it's really trying to figure out, what a change in tuition will do for your specific market. And to follow what another school does in Maryland, or another school does in Florida, or anything like that, with a reset or net tuition revenue, it's great. You get the ideas, but you can't exactly just say, I'm going to model it right after what they do. You have to look at the market, you have to do the research, and you got to figure out, what does this mean for us? Because whatever you do, there's always going to be implications. For
Correct.
example, going back to your question about reset, and I actually just got out of the meeting and we were kind of talking about the philosophy of that. Is that, well, what happens if your enrollment doesn't increase? What happens if it doesn't have your retention? You've brought tuition down to a certain level, and the point, you have to look for the next couple of years and the next couple of years and what that is and what that's going to look like. And so you have to do your homework for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of smart board members out there, a lot of smart people, business office managers that are they're gonna question no matter what you do. If you raise it 8%, or you raise it 5%, or you raise it 2%, or if you reset it or just freeze it. What does that mean in long term for the long term sustainability of the school? And so you really got to focus on having the right data, and the data is out there for you. You don't have to go find it. Back in 2008 when I was in Ohio, there wasn't these kind of resources. You had to look at census, and you had to look at this, and you had to look at that, and you had to ask your families how much money they made, and then put it into an Excel spreadsheet and then figure it out. So the data's there. You just have to use it now.
Along that lines too, obviously day schools, talking about tuition, but the bigger issue, if you go over to boarding, that you're talking literally almost double, triple sometimes on the tuition costs. And Jack, even though you're at a day school now, you kind of cut your teeth on the domestic and international boarding side of things. So do you have any insights with that market, or warnings, or how are schools going to adapt and survive in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I do, but I don't want to be on some heads hit list that we know, by saying the wrong thing. But I think back in 2008, 2009, 2010, when tuition and boarding schools was getting up, you have these international folks that are coming over, and they're paying for they want to pay the most because it's a prestige thing. In China, it's a bragging part. My school costs this. What does your school cost? Well, it must not be as good. And so you have to be careful of where you go with your marketing on that, and where you set your tuition at. But could all the boarding schools? I mean, if you look at the how much did we concentrate on international tuition, Jesse, when we were at Montverde? It was a lot. It was and what was hurting was the domestic boarding. But that was across the board. That wasn't just at one school. That was across the United States. And so what can you do to get more domestic? Because there's international kids that are not going to come to a school with all international kids, and there's domestic boarders that are not going to go to a school with all international kids. So you really have to try to find that perfect segue into okay, where can we fit both? And a lot of boarding schools have done it with merit and some of the other merit scholarships and some of the other stuff. But it's really been net tuition revenue that's helped with domestic boarding, at least in my experience. Whether it was in Alabama or Florida or up in Connecticut, the international piece. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with international after COVID. I mean, a lot of schools aren't even on campus, and the kids they're quarantined in their rooms doing virtual. Well, you're not going to spend $70,000 to do that. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to see how we come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, before you had different markets that could get you out of this, that really weren't getting hit as badly as others. But in with this unique situation, there is no market that's not hit by COVID. There's no international place that is like immune to it, and they're going to bounce back so quickly. And that's going to be our saving grace for all these international boarding schools. Like, we're all going to be kind of coming out of this relatively the same, at least, as far as the Western countries and a part of the Eastern ones as well. It's just, where is it going to come from? When you talk about the backlog, that immigration visas that are going to be having to go, the run on the embassies once it is available, not just for students, but you're talking for businessmen and women traveling, normal travel. Once travel opens up, it's going to be incredible to see how everyone's going to be able to manage that, and when are they really going to be on campus? Is it worth that value cost? I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see.
But you can also look at 3 or 4 years ago, there was a lot of independent schools, boarding schools that were looking to open up campuses throughout the world. Mm-hmm. if again, you go back to that, the crystal ball where you can see into the future, if you had known COVID was going to happen this year, wow, that's a huge idea because your product is over there. And so there's a few schools that have that model that are going to be okay. And they're in specific areas, whether it's China or whether it's in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the schools that didn't do that. And I was at one before here that we were this close to opening up a school in China, and so close, and it didn't happen. And then a year or 2 years later, COVID hits, and all of their kids are not on campus. And so
yeah,
it's the one thing I love about this job. You come in every day and something new is gonna happen, or you're gonna have to deal with something that you should have done or you wish you had done, and so sometimes it's better to just take the chance and do it and see where it happens. That doesn't go over well with a lot of heads of schools and that kind of idea, but the ones that have been have thought ahead are going to be the ones that I believe will come out on top when this is all over.
Yeah, I mean, you need creative forward thinkers. I mean, no matter what the position is to get out of this, it's going to be headmasters, it's going to be, development office, admissions directors, business office managers. I mean, every piece and every role on campus, including, teachers. How are you going to add value to a virtual lesson? Everyone's going to have to up their game in order to survive this, and it's not business as usual right now. Everyone's being asked to do a lot, but you're right. I mean, guiding that ship. If you are maintaining the things of the past and waiting for it to pass over, it's probably going to pass you by, and you're going to be left behind. You're definitely going to need to think of some new ways to get through this mess. But that's
before we wrap up, Jesse, I have one more question for Jack,
Yeah.
and kind of just based on our own relationship. Jack and I had we were in a position where we were able to work together, as he was overseeing admissions and I was overseeing the, development advancement side. Jack, earlier you mentioned, that enrollment is responsible for, in some cases, 85, 90%, if not higher, in a lot of independent schools. What do you see kind of, outside of obviously COVID now and the situation going on, but, what is the role and dynamic you see for both, admissions and development moving forward? A lot of schools are moving to the advancement model where advancement includes both development and admissions because it's the revenue center for the school. Mm-hmm. And so what is your take on that? What do you think the best model is, and kind of how do you see that moving forward?
Well, I will say that in development, or giving has gone up during COVID. So that's been kind of interesting, where people, typically are going to hold on to their money a little bit more or saying that. But, I think the whole thing with in this school right here with our first graduating class, we haven't had much of an alumni, or anything like that issue, to worry about. And as we graduate more classes, we will. But looking at philanthropy and things like that, there's, in most schools there's a handoff. I enroll them, and in our case, Chris, you go and ask them for money, whether it's alums or whether it's current parents, and there's that handoff that's often sometimes happens seamlessly, and then often and sometimes it'll happen where there's a disconnect because maybe I know the family better than you. And so the model of the advancement model that a lot of schools are going to is interesting to look at, because you've got that one person that builds that relationship from the time that they come in. And if you look at a school like this, you're looking at maybe a 12-month-old to a 12th grader, and that's a long time to be anywhere and have relationships. But even if you're looking at a 9th grader to a 12th grader or something like that, so I think it's all about those relationships and those and I do car line duty every morning. Every morning I do car line duty, not because I want to be out there in the freezing cold, or not because I've been told to do it. It's because it's the relationship building part that is going to help me in retention. It's going to help with relationships when something does go wrong or something does go really right, but also in the giving part, which I think is so important.
Well, I will say this. I mean, having, working with you and having that relationship definitely helped me do my job better. I mean, a lot of times I was able to talk to families and get contributions to the school based on conversations I had because of the information you had or the conversations you've already taken place. So I do think, the advancement model and schools moving forward, it's going to be very crucial for admissions and development to continue to work together.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So, Jack, we always like to wrap up the show, with some insight about, your region and being Arkansas. Are things that you're seeing similar to everywhere else in the country? Are there some unique things happening in Arkansas that we might should know about? What are you seeing in Arkansas?
Well, I can't really speak for the southern part of the state where there's other independent schools, but I can say Northwest Arkansas, it's been interesting and to see specifically this past year of what's important to families and what they're looking for. And, you look at what we've done with risk mitigation, we've, made closer, smaller class sizes, and we've done a lot of different things with cohorts and stuff like that. It's going to, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's going to be interesting to see how we all come out of this and how and what we've done and what we've worked on. We were a firm believer that we had to open when we said we were going to open in August, and we pushed everything we had to do that. So right there, it started, a lot of people being like, okay, well, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Let's do it. And so in this region, with cases skyrocketing and things going on, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, Jesse. I think that there's going to be some interesting things happening with public schools and how big they've gotten and all that. And maybe we'll be able to reap some of the benefits of that. But having two independent schools, it's not like where I'm used to being in Florida or Connecticut, where you can make a 360-degree turn and you can see one on every corner.
Right.
Exaggerating. So we don't necessarily consider the school that's up north of us competition. Do we lose kids to them? Yes. Our competition is really in the value proposition and trying to find out how we can get public school families to think about us or think about something different when they're not looking for a religious base, or they're not looking for, because there's plenty of religious based schools around here, parochial schools. We want to be their option. We want to be their option. And whether it's, you talk about pre-COVID, after COVID, 5 years from now, it's getting them to understand we were in early childhood, 50 years, we've grown, we had our first graduating class. It's building that, it's getting the right kids in, the right families, and moving forward in this specific region. So it's hard to compare when you talk to other people and like, yeah, our enrollment's gone down, 30%. Well, ours not necessarily has this year, which is different than the third team.
So would you say that, final follow-up, I guess, would you say that, your biggest opportunity is, your biggest competitor, which is the public school, and the way that they've been able to handle COVID? Or do you see opportunity in other areas as well, with the enrollment season this year?
I think it's a little bit of the COVID, because I hate talking about COVID and what we have to do and what we're going to do. And, we're going to have COVID on our minds for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And so that means we're going to, there's going to be people that are going to start planning for next August with COVID on their minds. And you have to hope that we're going to get out of this. And so, yes, you're going to have those families that are going to say, well, yeah, this is going to be around for a while. So we need to rethink our educational, what we're looking for in education. But you also have to say, okay, this is going to end sometime. And if you're not ready to come out of it and do the right things and have the right things in place, whether it's tuition, whether it's enrollment management, making sure that you have full classes, I mean, you could be in trouble. And so this is a hard time to be. I would say it's probably harder than 2008 when the economy just crashed. Mm-hmm. Because we have so many what ifs and what's going to happen here and what's going to happen there.
Yeah, uncertainty is always worse than actually knowing the grim reality, right? Because at least you can plan and prepare for, to your point, a crashed economy and how do you survive it. But if you don't know what the next 6-12 months is really going to look like, it becomes very, very academic when you're in those planning sessions.
Well, and the schools that think outside the box and use creativity and think of different things are going to be the ones that come out of this, come out of the economy, come out of all the issues that we're dealing with right now at the forefront. And so I'm grateful, for a head that allows me to think outside the box, allows me to be creative, a board of trustees that does that as well. And so, we're excited about it. I mean, as much as you can be excited about it. I mean, it's hard to be excited about anything right now with everything that's going on, but they're at least giving us the opportunity to say, what if, or what does this mean if this happens? And that's what you want.
Awesome. Well, Jack, thank you so much for being on the show. We've covered some big ground there on a wide range of financial issues, and I think that anyone that's viewing this is definitely going to have a better understanding of some things that may work for them, some things they may have already been trying and they've just been reassured on. But I'm definitely enlightened. I know Chris is as well, just by the look on his face. That's the enlightened Chris Mitchell right there.
Anytime I talk to Jack Sweeney, I'm enlightened. So
thank you guys. You guys are awesome. You guys, this is great, and I definitely want to see more schools, get involved with you guys, because we've seen it work for us, and I want to see you guys do well.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right,
Chris,
have a good one. See you next week.
Shave, Chris. I shaved for you this morning.
Yeah, I
have
should
a good week, everyone. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.